Salutations, gentle viewers. I'm George from Ireland. Now this video is about the rise of anti-scientific beliefs. Well, they've always been around. We go back to prehistoric times. We knew virtually nothing about science, but in recent centuries we've made enormous advances. But the troubling thing is that in the past few decades, anti-scientific beliefs have been on the rise again. And at the moment, anti-vaxxers are spreading their message. That is, those who oppose vaccines say we shouldn't take vaccines or we shouldn't be immunized against things. So what is a vaccine? In case you don't know, we'll try and put it in layman's terms, and I'm a complete non-scientist myself. It's one of these medicines that someone will take so that he or she will probably not get a certain disease. It doesn't always absolutely guarantee you won't get it, but it can hugely reduce the chance of you getting it. So giving yourself a tiny dose of whatever illness it is, you might feel a very mild malaise, but in the long run you won't suffer the deadly disease. You can have them against mumps, measles, rubella, smallpox, loads of things, or it's a bit like taking prophylactics against malaria or something like that. So some of these diseases you can take them against are contagious, others are not contagious, like malaria, getting it from being bitten by mosquitoes. So it seems that we're returning to sort of superstition. Now, we never quite gave up superstition, but it's becoming more popular and more strongly ingrained superstition. So superstition is an anti-scientific belief when there isn't a proper cause and effect, which is demonstrable, such as if you open an umbrella inside, it'll bring bad luck, or bad things happen on Friday the 13th, or cracked mirror will lead to 7 years bad luck, something like that. Or if you have a wart, if you rub it with a coin and put the coin under the stone, the wart will disappear. Now, I know there's a bit of a placebo effect, or maybe I should say anti-placebo effect. There's a bit of a psychological impact here, because if you believe something will cause you to feel ill, then you might actually feel ill as a result, because it's mind over matter. You've sort of tricked yourself into doing it. Or indeed you believe something will make you better, then that might actually help. There's been a study about this done with prayer, although actually it had an inverse effect. Knowing that you're being prayed for your recovery bizarrely made people worse. So there's been a lot of New Age superstition, wearing crystals going to make you better, a lot of pseudoscience, things like homeopathic medicine, treating like with like. But the thing is, if you can prove on a scientific level that it works, if you can do a proper study with all these thousands of individual case studies, then it is science. Like double-blind tests. If I'm a volunteer in an experiment, and I've been one, and I could be given the placebo, which is just a neutral substance, would have no effect on my health, or it could be given the real medicine. I don't know whether I'm getting the real one or just the placebo, like a dummy is the placebo. And the doctor who's administering it, he or she doesn't know whether me, the patient, has been given the real medicine or just a placebo. And that's why it was double blind. It's blind on my side, blind on his or her side, and things like that. And have to have lots of volunteers in control for age and gender and general health and all the rest of it. So you have a representative sample. So if you could use homeopathic medicine or something like that on a huge scale and have statistically significant results, so that it wasn't just luck, it was beyond the realm of coincidence, then that would be science. But that's not the case. So in 1789, there was a French Revolution. It's meant to usher in an age of reason, and saying someone was reasonable was the best thing for a radical or revolution to say, rather than just saying, well, this person stands with purblind tradition, and this is the accepted way of things have been done. And we became more mechanistic in our view of the world, saying that it could be separated into parts and things could be changed and so on, rather than having an organic view of the world and the state, that well, it's like a living organism and we can't take one bit out because the whole thing would die or something like that, and defending irrationalism and superstition and blind faith as we were before. And it's around this time we moved to, let's say, vaccinations, Edward Jenner coming up with them, although actually he wasn't original. Some people say that the Turks or the Circassians have been using them for centuries. Well, certainly he spread them in England and then they were spread throughout the world to America. I think Benjamin Franklin was instrumental in popularizing them there. And some of the religious authorities of the day, they railed against this. This is interfering with divine will. No, we must let people get smallpox. Smallpox, obviously, well, it's communicable, and the people getting pox, as in looks like little bites all over their skin, and they can die. Sometimes they survive and go on. Stalin famously had it. So that's smallpox. Because and there was cowpox and things like that. Jenner noticed there was in art, there were always these paintings of these radiant milkmaids, and poets were often waxing lyrical about the lubricious milkmaid and her youthful, healthy, glowing skin. Why was that, Jenner wondered, and seeing that they were milking cows by hand, squeezing the udders, and getting their fingers and thumbs slightly scratched with cowpox, but that gave their body a tiny dose of something like smallpox, and then the body learned how to deal with it and could fight off the real disease when it got it. So that was his theory. And then he got a little boy whose father agreed, well, you can try it on him, give him the cowpox, and then we'll infect him with smallpox and see if it helps him. And it did. Well, you wouldn't get that past any ethics committee today, because had it gone wrong, it would have killed the child. But there we are. So a lot of pernicious anti-scientific beliefs out there, people saying that AIDS is a hoax or things like that, or HIV doesn't lead to AIDS, and it's frightening, and bizarre theories about how illnesses can be cured. Like Michel Foucault was one of the most dangerous anti-scientific polemicists around. In case you don't know who he was a French philosopher who died in 1984, and his father was a doctor, and Foucault had a dreadful relationship with his father. So Michel Foucault, he believed that it was all in the mind, that medicine is nonsense, that doctors are just control freaks, they like bossing people around, and they like seeing people in the nude, they're perverts, they're petty tyrants, so we don't need to believe in all this. So it was staggering that someone who was so extraordinarily intelligent could have some absolutely off-the-wall beliefs, but hey, genius comes with madness. And the trouble is, he misused his prestige and his professorial status to be disseminating these nonsensical beliefs. And he claimed that AIDS didn't exist. It was part of homophobic hysteria. He was gay himself. And indeed, he died of AIDS in 1984. So there we are. So it's like people taking an Iron Age myth as Holy Writ. Like there's something in the Bible saying that if you hold up snakes, they won't bite you. And so there's some snake handler churches in the United States where they get loads of snakes in a box, kick them around to make them furious and pick up loads of them. Occasionally get bitten and die and say, oh, well, that's God's way. That's just God's way. But you didn't have enough faith, because I thought you were saying if you had sufficient faith, then this lethal venom wouldn't kill you, and so on. So some people are just rejecting empirical evidence. And the past few years, some people were saying, oh, experts don't know anything. Now, experts aren't always right. It's about the likelihood of being right and basing decisions on hard evidence, and not just opining on the basis of, well, I was brought up this way, or I feel that way, privileging sentiment over evidence. So in the United States, there have been a lot of these groups, and it's troubling. Of course, the United States having the best funded universities in the world, some of the most highly rated ones, and so many scientific breakthroughs and medical discoveries are there. And yet there's such a big anti-scientific movement. Mary Baker Eddy, back in the 19th century, she founded Christian Science, this type of church, which is more or less a rejection of medicine and just pray to get better. If you're prayerful enough, you'll be cured. And using medicine shows a lack of faith. And then children were sometimes dying because their parents refused to seek medical attention. Why is it either or? You can seek medical attention and pray. God could work through the doctor or the nurse. So there's a bit of a rise in these beliefs. Not everyone believes them, of course. Some people wouldn't go to the doctor about this and that, but not take vaccines. And it's frightening to see someone as rational as Bill Maher mouthing off about this stuff. So, okay, you're against vaccines. Why has smallpox been eradicated? Why have so many other diseases hugely reduced? It's because of all these things. It's because of all these injections we got when we were very little. But all medicines work on more or less the same basis, about having to experiment with them, or these days do some cute computer model tests and test on animals for several years, then test on humans for several years before they're finally licensed. So if you really believe that, then you know that you don't trust science at all or any medicines, you wouldn't take aspirin or ibuprofen and Nurofen or cough syrup or just about anything, because we got it all through more or less the same method. So there's the suspension of disbelief. William Taylor Coleridge came up with the expression. So at some level we would disbelieve in something, but then we say, well, I'll just put that to one side, my reason, and I will just put faith in something. Now that's all right if it's theatre, and you know at some level this is just a performance on a stage, and this is not reality. But the trouble is, some people do this with regard to things that really matter about science and medicine. It makes them feel, I suppose, very clever and strong to disbelieve and say, oh, I'm not going to take vaccines because it'll make my children worse. And then these dreadful so-called documentaries were coming out saying it's poisoning everybody and railing against big pharma. Now, I know pharmaceutical companies are obviously profiteering and they often charge too much and things like that. And sometimes people were prescribing things willy-nilly, like Ritalin in the United States or Prozac. People treating people as depressed instead of dealing with the social and economic causes of that, of falling real-term wages, of lack of stable jobs, of overwork, things like that, of social isolation, medicalizing problems which are not primarily medical, or Ritalin for children's behavioral problems, ADHD, when I suppose they've been overstimulated by computer games, they've been conditioned to have no attention span, or there's family breakdown. These things are sometimes causing their misbehavior and their disruptiveness. They don't have enough sport, they're eating too much sugary food and other junk food, so they're hyperactive and they don't have a healthy outlet for it. But then we're giving them industrial quantities of Ritalin. Or sometimes just a lack of family discipline. We would just say that child is badly behaved, you're naughty. But some teachers say, you can't say someone's naughty, children are not naughty. Of course they're naughty. I was naughty. Adults are naughty too, in a sense. It depends on which level and how much. And in saying that they can't take responsibility for the behavior, that there is no such thing as bad behavior, this is preposterous. And giving them things like Ritalin more than they need is ridiculous. Diagnosing huge numbers of children with all sorts of psychological disorders instead of tackling it through punishment and other behavior. So, faith. Well, faith is so often the enemy of reason. People want to believe in some ancient story about magical power. Doesn't have to be a bad thing. You can believe in the supernatural. It could be perfectly harmless. But if it gets in the way of actually reducing suffering, well, surely that is regrettable. There's too much wishful thinking that if I believe this or say this, then it's going to come true. He's looking out for us. There's obviously an awful lot of self-delusion. Well, I think we often overestimate the decency, the intelligence, and the wisdom of the majority. Well, most people are good. Most people aren't stupid. If most people believe it, it can't be false. Well, obviously it can be false. Most people have been dead wrong about many things in the past. We'll say where the center of the universe was. Endless things. If Australia even existed, or that are women capable of being doctors or something? You go back to the 18th century, everybody would have said no, because there were none at the time, not a single one, as far as I'm aware, and on and on. On moral, is enslaving people acceptable? At one time, most people would have said yes, certainly of a particular race, about another race. So let's not imagine that the human species has changed permanently to always be reasonable, humane, sagacious, and so on. So what can be done? It's difficult to fight back against all these anti-scientific beliefs. I suppose that's a question for another video.